Hi, welcome to this science channel, which also covers image analysis and image processing. I'm absolutely delighted that I had the opportunity recently to talk to Annabel Slater, who created a digital model of the Sars-Cov2 virus. This is probably one of the most detailed scientific models of the coronavirus which is currently available. And it may be of interest to those of you who'd like to know a little bit about how do you go about actually creating a 3D model of a virus. So I hope you enjoy this. Hi Annabel, thanks very much for joining me today. It's been a while since I've seen you, and what I'd hoped to do today was just to have a little chat about some of the work that we've done together in the past on the Sketchfab page, but also more particularly the virus that you developed recently in collaboration with virologists at the University of Glasgow. And that virus seems to be attracting quite a lot of attention. I've noticed that it's been used in several publications, both locally and I think probably around the world. And I thought it might be interesting for some of the viewers on this channel, which concentrates a lot on image analysis and image processing. And I thought it might be of value to tell a little chat about how we do some of the 3D processing and some of the real applications of 3D processing. So maybe we could just start off, if I could ask you just to sort of introduce yourself and how you got into this sort of medical animation line of work.
So I long ago did a biology degree. I've always liked science, and followed that with a master's in science media production, and worked in science communication since then. So I think it's fair to say I've always been quite fascinated with both learning how things operate and look on a small scale, and then trying to think of ways to communicate that. So about 3 years ago, I moved to Glasgow to do the Masters in Medical Visualization and Human Anatomy, which is co-run by the University of Glasgow and Glasgow School of Art, because it struck me that I'd really like to learn how to visualize and show like how things look on a micro scale, and work on producing communication media and interesting sorts of things that show the appearance of biology.
Okay, thanks. So, and one of it was through the connections at Glasgow University that we met. I think we were both speaking at the same image analysis conference, as I remember. And so then we worked together for a little bit on within the College of Medical and Veterinary and Life Sciences, where we collected together some data and mounted it on a Sketchfab page for public engagement. Obviously, it was mainly yourself that did all of the processing of the data model. So I wondered maybe if we could have a look at the Sketchfab page and maybe give us your thoughts on some of the advantages and maybe some of the disadvantages, the pros and cons, I suppose, of using Sketchfab. I don't know if there's that many cons, but it's a fantastic tool. But maybe you could show us some of the models and just talk us through a bit about using Sketchfab.
Sure. Okay. What we were trying to do is to take take microscope data, take images which had been captured of cells and cellular components, and to turn them into 3D models, and 3D models which can then be viewed, can be used in teaching and learning materials, can be used in virtual reality applications, could be used in augmented reality applications. Really just make microscope data more accessible and put it into this interesting 3D form. And the great thing about this idea is that the data already exists. There's like a wealth of great microscope data and great research done by the University of Glasgow. I suppose the problem or the challenge is that not many people get to see it beyond, say, the researchers or beyond a few select journals. So we hit upon the idea of taking the confocal microscope data, which is what we started with, and transforming it into these 3D models, and then hosting it on this free model portfolio / marketplace known as Sketchfab. So Sketchfab is free to start an account on, free to join, free to browse, and you can upload 3D models there. And you can make them available for free download, or you can, well, sell them at a price. But yeah, it's a great resource for sharing interesting things. Yeah, so
there's a good point you made there about using these assets perhaps for AR or for VR. That some of these will be available for download by anybody if they wanted to make their own 3D animations using some of this data.
Yeah, and that's where we have the edge, because these aren't, say, illustrations or artists' impressions, but they're, actual representations of real phenomena. So the challenge was, when we were producing 3D models, is because they would contain a lot of data, a lot of detail, a lot of polygons. The file would be, pretty huge and pretty complicated. So what I had to do was to try and clean the file, clean the data, the appearance of the model, section out the parts that we wanted to use, so to show, and then also to reduce reduce the complexity of the mesh to make it a small enough file that can be displayed on Sketchfab. Because the only limitations of Sketchfab is that it's free to upload models, say up to, I think, 50 megabytes. Then with either with a paid account or with a special pro account, you can upload models up to 200 megabytes, and then beyond that for premium accounts.
You got a feel for what's the maximum polygon count that you would want to work with within Sketchfab?
Yeah, well, it was quite a learning experience, really, because some of these models did prove to be, even when they were within the 200 megabyte size limit, still had a huge amount of polygons. So this one has, about 3 million faces. If you compare that to the average other model on Sketchfab, people post all sorts of things up here, often like models to use in games, characters, digital art. Yeah, this is a pretty colossal face count. So I was always trying to find a balance between maintaining the accuracy of the model, the detail of the microscopic data, and then also trying to reduce the polygon count and reduce the amount of excess detail, so that it could, well, as you see, so that it would load in a reasonable time.
I remember towards the end of our project, you spent a lot of time on the influenza virus that came from the biologist. That was a pretty chunky geometry in that one, wasn't there?
We also became aware of a accurate model of the flu virus, the influenza virus, which had been made by a previous graduate of the Masters in Medical Visualization and Human Anatomy. Her name is Naina Nair, and she produced this model of the flu virus by basing it upon science papers about the influenza virus, and so learning the structure, its content, the dimensions of it, and then modeling it in 3ds Max. It's a really good example of how this is like an accurate model of the flu virus, an accurate building of it. So in a sense, it's almost like an artistic impression, but it's also a scientific impression of the flu virus. And I thought that was really striking. The virus elements came from the protein data bank, so these are all accurately modeled and captured, almost all of them, with a few exceptions, such as the viral capsid. So then come this year, and the COVID-19 virus, as the beginning of lockdown happened, Like everybody else, I think I was looking at my computer screen, wondering what this meant for my job, and suddenly faced with a lot of confusion about what was going to happen. Um, so it struck me that a good use of time and something that could be useful to do as well could be to try and build an accurate model of the COVID-19 virus. I got in touch with a scientist called Ed Hutchinson at the MRC Centre for Virus Research, part of the University of Glasgow, and asked if he had any advice, any interest in helping me to build a model of the virus, or even if such a thing would be possible. And so working with him, with his recommendations for science papers and his helpful feedback on the proportions and size of the virion, I managed to construct a accurate model of the COVID-19 virus using 3ds Max. Which is what we can see here at the top of the Sketchfab page. There's the whole virion. There is a close-up of a section of the envelope, so that's one of the spikes, and below it is the RNA, which is the red part, and then that's coiled with the nuclear protein, so it's in the center of the whole virion, and then a half view here.
Right. And you were telling me a while ago that the dimensions of this virus and all of the components of the virus are all very accurate.
Yeah, so that was my goal.
You see some very stylized ones in the literature and the news sometimes. The spikes that you see on your virus particle here are quite different from some of the ones that you see in animations, where they're really long things like big suckers on the ends.
Yeah. So it's built to be as accurate as possible, but given that there is still a lot that's not known about the structure of the virus, some of the dimensions and some of the elements of the virus are modeled on other types of coronavirus. Based on the dimensions in the scientific literature that was available at the time, I was able to model each element so that it's at the correct size in proportion to the other parts of the virus, in proportion to the other elements of the virus, and that the overall size of the virus, its diameter, the diameter of the spikes is accurate. I mean, again, no doubt this could be tweaked as further research happens. The diameter of the virus, for instance, was described as being anywhere from 120 nanometers to about 160 nanometers. I based it on the smaller end of the spectrum, so the diameter of my virus model is 120 nanometers. But perhaps we'll find out that the virus actually should be larger. The great thing about 3ds Max is that it's easy to go in and adjust proportions, and the great thing about Sketchfab is that they allow you to continuously upload models. Yeah. So it's easy to upload updates.
And that model at the moment is available as a free download.
Yep. Yeah. So I made up my mind. It was I don't know if this is going to be, say, useful to scientists, but perhaps it could be useful in people to help them to understand the virus. So I'm happy that it's available for free downloads. It was based on publicly funded science research anyway, and it's it's had a respectable number of downloads and a good amount of attention.
So I'm just looking down there. You've got 837,000 faces in this one.
There were a few technical challenges with the virus models. So as mentioned, the account that we have, Glasgow Life Sciences have with Sketchfab allows files of up to 200 megabytes. As I was trying to upload the model, there was actually quite a lot of difficulty. For some reason, it kept crashing. And the reason was because there was still a high number of triangles and faces in the models. So I ended up having to make versions of the models which are actually much smaller. So I think this one, well, the section model is only about 20 to 25 megabytes. The half model of the virion or the whole model of the virion are about around 100 megabytes. So it's actually well below the technical size limit. But having done this, I mean, on one hand, I had to compromise by, again, reducing the complexity of the mesh. So the spike structure lost some of its resolution, say. So they look a lot, less detailed. They look a bit smoother or a bit more jagged.
Yeah.
But I also realized this makes the model like it makes it easier to load. So, and I think that's really key when you're making 3D models or making anything that you want to be shareable online. You need to make it so it loads quickly on devices, loads quickly on mobile, and loads quickly, on a computer. But there isn't a full res, completely accurate version of each model, which can be found on the via the MRC VR website.
The colours are quite striking. How do you go around choosing colours for something like this, which presumably doesn't actually have a colour?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, just I ended up using what I thought looked nice. So at first I randomly chose colours, and I thought, oh, the purple looks quite nice. And so the spikes remained purple, the membrane remained, a light blue. People are free to download the model and put their own colour spin on it. This is just a combination that I opted for, which I thought highlighted things quite nicely. I focused on building the model, but I didn't focus on making a great appearance, perhaps great rendered, beautiful textures and so on, a great rendered appearance for the model. So I've also been experimenting a bit more with 3ds Max and making some more artistic looking renders of the virus as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn. There's a lot that could be done.
Yeah, I think I can see that could be really nice with you get all the subsurface scattering right with lots of nice textures. It could look pretty stunning, couldn't it? I've just noticed actually if you look at the screen that you're sharing there, at the top there's a recommendation to go to SARS-CoV2, and you see the little virus model that's down there. It's got huge big this kind of cartoony one, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, this is accurately proportioned coronavirus. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of that. I mean, as I say, I'm more than happy to take any feedback or comments on scientists if they believe that it could be made more accurate. And no doubt it shouldn't be a perfect sphere. Perhaps it could be a bit squishier, but I think it's everything is in proportion. So that's something to be proud of.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Annabel. It's been very interesting, and hopefully people will be interested in just to know how something like this comes about, because I'm sure a lot of people will see this virus. It could be on the news, it could be on the STV, as we've seen it appear in newspapers and so on. And there's not much thought goes into, I think, how much work goes into, because if you see it as an image in a newspaper, it just looks like somebody's painted it. But the fact that it's a full 3D model, it can be downloaded and more importantly, can be used in animations and games and anything else that anybody would want to use it for. But I think it's important to stress just how much work has gone into that. How many hours have you counted it up? How many working days have you spent on that?
It consumed most of my evenings and weekends. I mean, a large part of the difficulty was not understanding the science papers, but trying to find my way around 3ds Max, which though I learned and used throughout the master's course and have learned and used since then. There is just so many ways to model something. And finding out what the best way of modeling something, especially this virus, that's the biggest challenge. I've done a lot of creative Googling, a lot of watching tutorials. I mean, the thing that really preoccupied me at the beginning of modeling this was that I wanted to try and make sure that each particle, let's say, of these dark blue membrane proteins was the correct distance from each other. But then they also need to be the correct distance away from the spikes as well. You don't want to have like a spike directly on top of the membrane protein. And then there's also 4 envelope proteins in there. So you've got all these different elements. I really wanted to have them like a certain distance away from each other, but also to look natural and not just like rigidly plotted. Yeah, it's possible there may be more updates in future where I found a better way of achieving that effect. For the the really the I ended up just doing it as best as I could, but then doing an awful lot of like manual uh, reordering and manual moving around elements of the virus, which is it's like a child moving bricks around rather than writing some brilliant algorithm to do it for you, which is I'm sure must be possible, but I don't yet know how.
There's somewhere between an absolute chore and a labour of love then.
Yeah, definitely so. Yeah, any inaccuracies still torment me in a way, but they're also like a challenge. And every correction, every update of the model, every time I look at it, I can think of ways to change it.
Yeah, yeah, but I suppose like with all creations, there comes a time when you have to draw a line under it and move on to the next thing, or you just keep
Yeah,
endlessly tinkering. But
yeah,
that's an absolute cracker of a model. So and thanks for taking the time today to come and talk about it.
yeah. My
And
pleasure.
hopefully can come back and interview you once you've done your next model, whatever it might be, or animation.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to animate the virus actually doing something.
Would be
So,
terrific. Okay, well, thanks very much,
yeah,
and we'll see you next time.
yeah, thank you. See you soon.